I'm an alcoholic. With the time that we have this tonight and tomorrow, I'm going to do the best I can to go through this journey through the steps. And there's a lot of stuff in the book we probably won't get to. Doesn't mean it's not important. It's just time constraints. And I'm all prayed up and trust that God's going to take me to where I'm supposed to go. And if there's something I've left off, you should take issue with him. A couple things before we move into this finding this power source. There's 3 illusions or delusions in the book. 2 of them can be found on the first page of the chapter more about alcoholism. The first one is the one that kept me from ever really coming into AA and really putting all my chips in the pot. And it says the idea that somehow, someday, maybe some way, I'll be able to control and enjoy my drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. This idea that I could jumpstart the party, that there is ease and comfort, there's relief in the bottle, and that I can reap it and control it enough to keep the damage down to something reasonable. Now, I was never so delusional that I thought I would not have some price to pay. My delusion is I think I have enough control to keep the price in certain parameters. The truth is I could never predict what was going to happen. There are sometimes I'd get drunk and I don't know what, I didn't do any, I just stayed at home and drank and passed out, came to, drank, passed out, came, and I didn't do anything bad. There were other times, there were times where I'd come to after drinking and I'd be in a jail cell. One time I came to, the jail cell was covered with blood. And I didn't remember being arrested, and I found out that the only friend I had left in the world, I'd taken a hunting knife the night before, and I'd opened his chest up, and he was in intensive care, and they told me he was dying. And I didn't remember, I was in a blackout. And I can't even put into words the horror that I felt because I'm not that guy. It was like being beamed into the middle of some horrible movie, and that I couldn't control, and I couldn't believe I did that, and yet the evidence is overwhelming. I did it. I mean, I did it. I never knew what I was going to do, and that delusion has to be smashed. Until it was smashed, until I knew that there is no more enjoying this. And there is no controlling it. Until I really, in my heart of hearts, in my innermost self, know that, I have a back door right out of Alcoholics Anonymous. That if abstinence ever gets boring enough, depressing enough, lonely enough, frustrating enough, I don't have to go into AA and work these steps. I got a back door. Under the right set of circumstances, there might be some ease and comfort out there for me. And I don't know about you, but if I think that's an option, no matter how much intellectually I understand it's not a good idea, when my emotions are putting the screws to me, I'm taking the back door. Father Martin said it best, that when intellect and emotion are in conflict with each other, the emotion always wins because it's persistent and it has more power than the intellect. I bet you everyone in this room at some time or other ended up finding themselves drawn to doing something that they knew they shouldn't do. You know, no doubt, 100%, but your emotions are driving you. You can't, and there's no power, you can't change that. So this idea that somehow, someday, some way I'll control and enjoy my drinking, if that's not smashed, I will relapse myself to death. I will pursue this into the gates of insanity or death. And then the second one, it says, it's the third line in the second paragraph, it says, the delusion that we are like other people, or that we presently may be like them, like other people, has to be smashed. What does that mean? That's the idea that after I get all my ducks in a row, after I'm sober for a while, the obsession to drink is removed, I feel really good, I feel significant, my life's good again. Surely at that point, I've joined the normal race. I've become one of those people. Now, intellectually, most of us won't admit that consciously or unconsciously. Because we learn in AA, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Yeah, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. But here's what happens. As I get more and more sober and I work the program, what happens to me is my life starts to work. It might take 3, 4, 5 years before you pay everybody back, before you're off probation or parole, before the family starts to respect you again, and people start to really treat you with respect. And now maybe you got $100,000 in the bank. You got that job you always wanted. Maybe now you're married. Maybe you got a couple of kids now. Your life is starting to look like the picture that you have in your mind of a normal life. And you start to feel good. And did you ever notice when you feel good in sobriety, you may still understand you're alcoholic intellectually, but you don't really feel as alcoholic as you did when you were in that detox. When I was in that detox, I felt very alcoholic. Throwing my guts up. I had a bad case of alcoholism back there. And self-centered, self-obsessed, self-absorbed, self-focused people, as myself, have a tendency to judge how they're doing and who they are by the way they feel. Because self-centered people are obsessed with how they feel. And so what happens is I start getting seduced by the very fruits of my own recovery into a false sense of okayness. And it's like intellectually, it doesn't matter, because intellect has no power here. But intellectually, I'll keep telling myself, I'm an alcoholic. But I don't feel like one, and so maybe I was going to 7 meetings a week, now maybe I'm going to 3. Because I'm busy. Maybe I used to call my sponsor regularly and ask for advice, and I was transparent, and I'd ask for help. Now maybe I don't call him at all, or if I do call him, I call him after I went through something to tell him what I did in case he ever needs that information. And the ego returns, and it feels safe. I don't have the commitments I used to have. Got a big, abundant life, man. Big, abundant life. Property, money, prestige. Those are the things that divert me from my primary purpose. And I'm being seduced by the very fruits of my own sobriety into minimizing my involvement in my own recovery. And here's the tragic thing. I've watched this in so many people that are today are dead. They don't know they're doing it. They don't know they're doing it. Because there's a logical, reasonable excuse for every minimized action in AA. Well, I got these kids. Got that job. I'm president of the Elks Club. I mean, I've been watching Blacklist every week. I can't miss it. It makes all sense. It makes sense, doesn't it? And you don't know where the line is. Nobody knows where the line is. I'm telling you, nobody knows where the line is. You think you know, you don't know. You don't know until it's too late. You crossed it. Next thing you know, the obsession to drink's returned. There was a guy named, a funny guy in Vegas. He used to say, he said, well, if you think you're going to too many meetings, he said, just, you don't know exactly how many you need. Just start cutting one off and keep doing that until you drink, and that'll be the place right there. Right there. That's the place. So you don't know. And I had a guy in detox. God, it's been a lot of years now. I've been taking meetings in the detoxes and treatment centers twice a week since I got sober. It's probably 15 years ago at least. I don't know. This guy's in there, and the right reason I thought 17. He'd been sober 17 years, and he relapsed. And he said the silliest thing you've ever heard. He said, "I don't know why I drank again. I had a big house. I had 2 paid-for cars. I had a wife and 3 kids that adored me. I was making deep 6 figures a year. I don't know why I drank again. Things were going good." As if he thought all of that stuff was a treatment for alcoholism. If you went into a hospital and you watched a guy come out of a diabetic coma, and he says, "I don't know why I went into a diabetic coma. I have a new car." You'd want to slap him, wouldn't you? You'd say, "Well, what's wrong with you?" Right? But in Alkalogic, that crap makes sense to us. Because we feel good and we have property, money, prestige. And this delusion that we are like other people, or that presently may be, has to be smashed. There's so many of us don't want to be. When we're in trouble, we're willing to be alcoholic for a while, but forever? But alcoholism is patient. I've seen in that detox. I've seen some amazing things. I've seen there's rarely I wouldn't say a week anymore, but I'd say that it's at least once a month. I'll run into somebody who had over 10 years and drank again. We had one guy in there, one of my sponsees, George and I, we made a project out of him because he'd been sober 45 years and he drank. And Bill Wilson had been his sponsor. He was from New York. And he had all these great stories about Wilson. And so we were trying to, but he couldn't, he's dead. Because you know what the book says, over any considerable period we get worse, never better. It's not saying over any considerable period of drinking. This is a progressive disease. It's almost like it's in some other dimension getting stronger, just waiting for us to open the door and let us into this one. And it doesn't, that's why if you watch people who drink again after 20 years of sobriety, they do not pick up where they left off. If they picked up where they left off, I think they'd have a chance. But the disease has progressed so much. And the thing that seems to progress the most is the ego. The self-esteem and self-worth has shrunk to almost nothing. It's just gone away. But the ego, they become the I know people. You can't tell them nothing. They'll I know you to death. Yeah, I know. And intellectually they probably do, because they have a head full of experience. They were in AA 10 years. They have a head full of stuff, but it's up here. There's nothing in the innermost self that it talks about where all of this has to happen. Chamberlain used to say that this is an inside job. It doesn't happen up here. It's an inside job. And they have it up here, but they got nothing in here. And they can't get sober, a lot of them, again. They have to be really, really crushed until that all that ego, everything that they're depending on for security that keeps telling them they know something. They have to know the most important thing they'd ever know is they don't know. They think they know. They don't know. They don't know. And yet they think they know. That's why very statistically, if you're sober 30 years and you drink again, I know what would happen. I know what happened to a guy like me. I'm dead. I mean, I'm dead. There's no way about that. I know it. Because I'd probably come into meetings in the period between taking the first drink and dying, I'd probably come to meetings drunk and lecture all of you. Because I'd be the I know guy. I know. I'd be unsponsorable. I will always need a sponsor. More importantly, I need to remain sponsorable. Because you can have the best sponsor in the world, and if you're not sponsorable, it doesn't do you much good, really. The Hindus say the burden of the lesson is always on the student. It's never on the teacher. You can have a goofy, knucklehead, sub-average sponsor, a goofball sponsor. But if you're sponsorable, God will work through the idiot and give you everything you need. Everything you'll need, everything you need. You'll get everything you need. I'm telling you, because God channels to the receiver. He channels to the receiver. That's why you get it in me. When you're ready for Alcoholics Anonymous, do you ever notice you can come here and hear nothing? When you're there, all of a sudden everything makes sense. Everything resonates inside. Remember those experiences when you're new? When you're sitting there and you're hearing things from people that you've never actually heard that or thought that before in your life, and yet when you hear it, it echoes within you as if it touches a place where that's something you've always known, and yet you didn't know it until that second. There's just a rightness about it. And you can't, and know it, you just sit there and you go, yep, yeah. Carl Jung talks about the collective unconscious. I've often suspected that alcoholics have a subset of that because we resonate with each other in a way. I don't know that if you were to bring a friend of yours that's not an alcoholic from the PTA here, I don't know if they're going to resonate with our talks of suicide and depression. I think they're going to be horrified is actually what I think, but we know because we've been there. We know. We laugh at stuff that, my sister and my daughter and I get together. My sister went through my drinking. And she takes great joy at telling my daughter stories about me. And my daughter's 28, never seen me drink. She's only known what you made of me. And she loves her dad. And she loves what you've made of me. She never knew me back then. And she finds it hard to believe that I was that way. And I was that way. It's almost impossible, I guess. She looks sometimes, she hears the stories and just shakes her head and says, Dad, you peed in Grandma's kitchen? Often. Yeah. And then the third delusion is in step 3, in the warm-up to step 3. The first delusion keeps me from getting into Alcoholics Anonymous. The second delusion will prevent me from staying here. This idea that I'm going to get over my alcoholism. And then the third delusion seems to take a guy like me and prevent me from ever being really free and happy here. And that is, it says we're victims of it. We're victims of the delusion that we could rest with a W, like in wrestle. Rest, satisfaction, and happiness out of this world if we only manage well. I'll tell you, that delusion goes into the core of who and what I am. This idea that if I was properly financed, and I don't mean just little bit financed. I'm a little grandiose. I need about $100 million. If I was properly financed, if I had the right people loving me the right way, not like those others, but the right way. If I had the respect that I'd like to have, if I had the houses around the world and the G6s and all that, if I had all of that, surely then I will be happy and satisfied. The reason that that's a delusion, because no one ever tries harder to wrest happiness and satisfaction out of this world as we have. If it was possible, if it wasn't a delusion, then alcoholics would not be blowing their brains out in $15 million homes on the beach in Malibu like a guy did a few years ago, right? If that was true, then my sponsee who owned several casinos, when he sold one of them and he got a personal check, it was all his for $140-some million, he'd have been happy and satisfied because he could have bought anything he wanted in the world. He's dead. Because we know that no matter how good you get it out here, no matter how much you've rested, it doesn't matter how good you get it out here. If it ain't no good in here, it ain't no good. As a matter of fact, when I was 19 years sober, I doubt if I was never materially, I was never in a better place in my life. I don't think I would ever be in a place materially that good again. I mean, it was almost decadently pathetic. I was pretty bad. I mean, I was just self-indulgent. Oh God, it was horrible. I look back at some of that and I think, ooh, God, I didn't need all those cars. I didn't need all selfish. But anyway. But I had everything that a guy like me could ever want. Matter of fact, I ran out of things to buy. And I sunk into a horrible, dangerous depression. In the middle of an abundant life. In the middle of a life that the depression made no sense because I had everything I wanted. No problems. I had everything I wanted. And I didn't understand what was wrong. And a guy in AA, he told me the truth. He said, somehow I got to a meeting, I was so depressed I could hardly get there. I got there and started telling a friend of mine what was going on, and he said to me something that made me very uncomfortable because it was true. He said, well, you still go to meetings and you still have these people that say you sponsor them and you run your mouth a lot in AA. And he said, but I don't think your primary purpose is helping God's kids anymore. He said, I think your primary purpose is you. And they say the truth will set you free, it'll ruin your day first, I'll tell you. Because that was right. My whole life became about me. And it didn't happen overnight. I was seduced by the very fruits of my own recovery and abundance into being the center of my universe. I still did AA because my ego wants the bragging rights of a good AA member without putting all the chips in the pot. I'd moved all the chips over into the Bob pot. My finances, my sex life, my toys, my comfort, my ease, the way I feel, my security. I was the center of the universe. And it was horrible. You would think, like this guy I know that's dead that had hundreds of millions of dollars, you would think that having that kind of abundance would make some kind of a difference, wouldn't you? And it does make a difference, but it's not the kind of difference you'd expect. I think when you're sick in here, and you're vacant in here, and you're hollow in here, all that abundant life does is just make it all stand out in even stark and more painful relief against the backdrop of what should be a good life, and you're still you. It's bad. What do you do when you run out of things to buy and you can't escape the depression? What do you do? As Chamberlain said, when you get to that place where you can no longer find anything to put between you, and there you are. There you are. I've seen so many dear friends over the years commit suicide, sober. There was a woman in 1978 named Debbie, and Debbie was one of the pillars of AA. I mean, Debbie was on the Las Vegas Roundup Committee. Debbie was involved, she was a GSR. Debbie was involved in everything. Debbie and her partner went to meetings, probably went to 8-10 meetings a week. I mean, they helped me significantly when I was sober. They were easy to talk to. Sometimes it was easier for me to open up to them than it was to my sponsor because I still wanted him to think a certain way about me, right? But Debbie she laughed at stuff. She was right out there. She was easy to talk to. And at 43 and a half years of sobriety, Debbie put a pistol to her head and blew her brains out. And she had stopped 10 years before having a sponsor. About 10 years before, she got down to about one meeting a week. About 20 years before, she stopped doing service in AA because she started to become very successful and had a lot of money and a lot of property and a lot of prestige. Owned a very successful station, very lucrative. She got seduced by her own recovery and the fruits of it into backing incrementally away. Here's the silly part. When she killed herself, there were people in AA that were surprised. If you watched what she's been doing and you're honest and genuine enough with yourself to understand this sickness, I could see that would be me. That would be me. I'm not better than her. I mean, if I did and not did everything that she did and not did, I'm not superior to her, not better than her, not smarter than her. I'd ended up right where she ended up. Alcoholism is unforgiving. Unforgiving. Thank God, I just had a guy. It's only the second time that I've ever seen this. I've seen people leave AA incrementally, slowly, little bit by bit. But twice I've seen people formally resign from AA. They were sober a long time. I mean, there was a gal, 15 years ago. There was a gal in my home group, and she was very active. She was our GSR. We had several meetings a week. She was also the secretary of one of the meetings. She brought meetings into the Skid Row Detox. She probably sponsored more women at that time than any other woman I knew of in Las Vegas. Husband went out. She had these kids. She had this business. Everything was on her now. Take care of that. And she called me up. And she said, I'm resigning from AA. I thought she was kidding. I said, you can't resign from AA. She says, no, you don't understand. I can't do this anymore. I fired all my sponsees. I'm telling you, you need to get somebody else to be a GSR. You need somebody else to be the secretary of that meeting, and I can't come down to the West Care Detox anymore. I'm resigning from Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, Cindy, you can't resign from AA. She said, you don't understand. I have these kids. I have this business. I have this house I have to take care of. Nobody helps me. It's all on me. I can't do AA and do all this. I'm sorry. I'm done. I'm done with AA. I said, Cindy, don't do this. She said, I have to take care of my business. I have to take care of my kids. I have to take care of my house. I said, Cindy, listen to me. Please, listen to me. Your alcoholism doesn't give a crap about your kids. your alcoholism doesn't give a crap about your house and your business. 3 months later, took her 3 months to relapse, and she started smoking that ice, and she's never gotten back. She's been in and out of jail. Last time someone saw her, she didn't have any teeth. She was turning tricks on Skid Row. A friend of mine, guy sponsor, met her and ran into her on the street, started trying to talk to her. He came back to me. He was so sad. He said, "There's not enough left of her mentally to ever get back here. At that speed she's smoking's done something to her. I don't think she'll ever get back here." The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed. So, the problem with a lot of this stuff is I can't change me. You know, in the chapter, We Agnostics, it talks about the dilemma that we all face in chronic alcoholism. This is so much more than a drinking problem. It talks about these two things, and if they're both in place, you're screwed. The first thing it says, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely. Entirely. That means nothing. Well, what about marijuana? It's organic. What if I got a note from a doctor saying I should smoke it? See, I can't quit entirely. My sponsor says you can change to other stuff. He says it's like changing deck chairs on the Titanic. Right? But I can't quit entirely because of the nature of how sick I am inside. Sober, restless, irritable, discontent. As it says on page 52, prey to misery and depression. Can't make a living, feeling of uselessness, full of fear, etc., etc. I got all of that. I'm all of that. Sober. See, it's not enough to know that I have an abnormal reaction to alcohol. What I had to know in my heart of hearts is I have an abnormal reaction to abstinence. And that's why I need AA. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous is designed to treat, is the way I show up in life and the way I am sober. So, if when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, the book says you are probably screwed. And it says, if that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Isn't it odd? I look back at how God-resistant I was and how prejudiced I was. I could be in a meeting and I could be half-assed listening to some speaker and sort of identifying with his drinking, and yeah, I'm like that. Oh, I did that. Oh, God, I felt like that. Oh, yeah, I did that too. And then the minute he talks about God, it's like, oh, he's one of those people. He's a sunbeam for Jesus. You know, I just discount everything he said, because my alcoholism is the most defended mechanism, and it will pick you apart. It'll do anything it has to do to not let you get in, it doesn't want anything getting to it, especially the idea of God. It is very defended when it comes to that stuff. Very defended. And yet, this idea of a spiritual experience, I don't know why that was so repulsive to me when in actuality I had spent my whole life seeking that. I drank for a spiritual experience. I drank to get to free my spirit. My whole life was about it. And yet, I come to AA and you start talking about that stuff and I just discount you and I make fun of you in my head. And on page 45, it talks about the real dilemma of the alcoholic. It says, lack of power, that was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live. And it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. Well, where and how were we to find that power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself which will solve your problem. There's a lot there. One of the things that really hits me in there that's so true, it says that we had to find a power by which we could live. See, this is not about the power not to drink. The problem is I cannot drink and I don't know how to live. I don't know how to show up in the world. I don't have the power to come out and play. I don't have the power to externalize and extemporate myself and be out here with you. I don't have the power to wish away my depression. I don't have the power to shut this off so I stop worrying about crazy stuff. I don't have the power to fit. I don't fit with people sober. I don't have the power to connect with people. I don't have the power to make this loneliness go away. I don't have the power to stop being restless, irritable, discontent. I don't have the power to not be afraid. I don't have the power to live. That's why abstinence to me feels like, it's not living, it feels like I'm doing time. And I'll do it because I get it. I get that this drinking's killing me. I get it. So I'll do the time for a while. I just can't sustain that. I can't do it very long. I'm like wimpy when it comes to emotional pain and loneliness and distress and desolation. And I think we all have different fuses here. I've met people in Alcoholics Anonymous that are able to not drink for decades. I sponsor a guy who, he came to me, he was 23 years sober with the benefit of step none. He'd never helped and by 23 years sober, he had a case built on everyone he'd ever met. I mean, he was right about everything. He was one of the angriest and most crazy, and he came to me because he was going to kill himself. Sober, he was going to kill himself. He had a gun, everything. He was going to commit suicide. And as he's setting it up to go commit suicide, the obsession to drink returned. Now that messed him up because he doesn't mind killing himself. He just doesn't want everybody in AA to know he lost his sobriety, right? Right? Now isn't that silly? That's silly. He's going to be dead, but he wants everybody to think he was still sober 23 years, right? So he comes, we start working together, and Daddy was so uptight. I remember one time, the ego is what progresses for sure. We're after a meeting, and he's burning me out, man, just going on and on, taking everybody's inventory, everybody in AA and all his family members and his sister and his brother, and he has nothing good to say about anybody. It's all just tearing them down. He's tearing everybody in the group down. If I wasn't there, he'd be tearing me down, I'm sure. And I finally got fed up with it. I said, listen, Jerry. I said, Jerry, look, listen. I got to go. I want you to do something. You do something? Oh, yeah, I'll do. What do you want me to do? I want you to go home and I want you to say this prayer tonight. I want you to get down on your knees and I want you to beg God. I said, God, please, tomorrow, I want you to judge me and treat me the way I've been judging and treating people today. Would you do that, Jerry? He said, yeah, I'll go ahead and do it. And I walked across to my car. I get about halfway to the car, and I'm not going to say the word he said, but it was like something you. Right? I heard it coming because it hit him what that prayer would mean. Right? I watched a man go through the steps, a man that had no one in his life. I watched a fellowship grow up around him. And they started calling him in my home group. They started calling him Sweet Jerry. He became the guy that when he walked into a room, there'd be 10 people would run over to say hello to him. He had a light. There was just something about him everybody liked. It had always been there. It was just covered up by a lot of crap. It's in all of us. It's just covered up by a lot of crap. And Alcoholics Anonymous is designed to set that thing free. And it's always been there. I wouldn't have known it. On page 55, it sort of talks about this. I think 55 is really it's a vision of what I'm going to experience as a result of steps 4 through 9. As a result of this process of uncovering, discovering, and discarding what I'm going to find and what's going to happen to me. In the second paragraph on page 55, it's coming right out of this long section that talks about our doubts and our prejudice and our resistance to God. And it starts off by saying, actually, we were fooling ourselves. For deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. Deep down within me. I remember listening to old-timers when I was new talk about that. You know, they talk about listening to the still small voice of God within them. I remember Chuck Chamberlain